coming. This is a meeting of it's called SOCAN. It's our monthly meeting. We meet the fourth Wednesday of every month, except for December, because the fourth Wednesday is Christmas. I'm going to pass these around. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to enter their name, please do. And if you want me to contact you, please put your email address on there. I see many of you have already got this. So I have just a couple of announcements I want to make. If you would, please take one of our cards from the desk there. It has contact information on that, as well as our website. And donations are always welcome. I want to mention something that I got in the email. Alan Jornet, who is the co-facilitator of SOCAN proper in Medford, sent me a letter about House Bill 2020, which you, I'm sure all know about its demise. Anyway, he sent me this letter, and it has a lot of information about what's really in the bill that just didn't make it to the news. So I'm not going to go through it. It's several pages long. If anybody would like this letter and the contents that Alan has put in there, please contact me after the presentation. I'll be glad to get it to you. Or my email address is on the card in there, and you can contact me that way, and I'd be glad to send it to you.
And while we're on that subject, our speaker for next month is going to be talking about the politics of these things. Our speaker is...
Yeah, were you going to announce him?
Bill...
Bradbury.
That's why I didn't
Bill Bradbury
the
will
last
be
name.
next. And right now I want to introduce Deb Worth, who's going to say a few words about Cherish the Chetco event and solicit your support.
I'm Deborah Orr, and because of SOCAN, we've gotten involved with Cherish the Chetco, which is the South Coast Watershed Council is the overseeing organization of the event. It's a lot of fun. It's going to be August. It's a Saturday in 2019 at Alfred Lowe Park. It's going to be we're going to do floating the river. If you have a kayak, please come. Make sure it's inspection for invasive species still. There's an inspection site not too far from the California inspection station. There's a separate inspection site for watercraft. You've got to be very careful about not introducing invasive species into the waters. We're going to be doing trash pickup, a lot of trash pickup. Wherever we see it, there's at least 3 spots we're going to try to pick up some trash and haul it out. There's going to be a river trail hike along the river, and maybe some history and botany and biology. It'll be fun. And there'll be kids there doing water science, which I think is always a good thing. These kids are our local children from the schools here, and they're learning about stream biology. That's going to be under Stacia, who's running that organization, running that part of the program. So come join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's a couple of flyers on the table. August 10th, 2019, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., rain or shine. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yes, we're going.
Oh, I need volunteers. If anyone would like to sign up for this, and I pass that around with a pen. And it's going to be lots of fun. Oh, and free lunch.
So I'm Lee Tilley. I'm also part of Coastal SOCAN, and I wanted to welcome you all to this month's presentation with Jacob Knudsen. He's the head of marketing and consumer relations, member services manager over at Coos Electric, which we thought would be a fantastic follow-up to Shannon Souza last month talking about energy security. He can answer all kinds of questions about solar and smart grids and all those kinds of things that we want to know that we can find out from our cooperative, and also be sure to find out about the home analysis to find out how to save money with your electric bill. Great stuff. We're going to try and hold most of the questions for our discussion afterwards. So we're going to have him speak for a while. If you don't understand something, please don't hesitate to question him. But we're going to have a little discussion group afterward. That's why we're in a circle. You're all real welcome to close up the circle, come in closer if you like. I would warn you, though, that we have a camera running in the back. So if you sit this way, you're going to be in the frame. Or if you walk in front of it, obviously you'll be in the frame too. So there's that to consider. But welcome, everybody, and we're ready to go with Jacob. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Well, good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Jacob Knudsen. I'm with Coos Electric, and I hope to spend some time talking with the group about conservation and net metering, which is the way that we handle the buying and selling of energy if someone has a power plant on their house, a solar panel on their Can we shut that door? I'm kind of soft still, or is it going to get a little hot in here?
Yeah, shut it, Jacob.
Okay.
If I end up being too quiet, just let me know, and I'll try to speak up. So my comments are going to be pretty high level at this point, why we have conservation programs, what the goals of those kind of programs are, and what distributed generation looks like in Curry County, and how effective that can be. When we wrap up, if you have questions how that might apply to you individually, we can talk about that. I didn't include that here because those applications are so personal. Everyone's situation is different in the way that they use energy. So we'll just jump in. I do sometimes slip up and start using industry acronyms because we speak in those all day long at work. So if I say something that is not English, just call me out and I will attempt to clarify. So why do we have conservation programs? Most people that I ask say that we have a conservation program to reduce electrical consumption to benefit the environment somehow. And indirectly, yes, and that's on the list, but believe it or not, conservation programs were not developed with the direct intent of helping the environment. They were developed with the intent of saving money. That's the reason most things are developed. So we have kind of a sample electrical grid here. We have some central station power over here. We can have natural gas or coal in some places in the U.S. Lots of hydro in the Pacific Northwest. Some wind in the Pacific Northwest. The power is generated. It gets moved through the bulk transmission system to a distribution utility like Coos Electric, where we receive that energy and then we distribute it out to the end users, the businesses and homes in our service territory. In a situation like this, generation and demand always have to match exactly. And there has to be enough capacity on these lines. The road has to be wide enough to handle traffic. So when you get up in the morning and you flip on a light switch in your house, a generator somewhere else has to speed up enough to accommodate that light switch. And when you flip it off, a generator somewhere else has to slow down enough to accommodate that loss of load. And those electrons travel in the speed of light from where they're generated to where you're using them. So when we think about everything having to be in balance all the time, if we have more load, if we need more electricity than we have generation, we're going to have a problem. And the problem usually is brownouts and rolling blackouts like you hear about in California. Fortunately, we've been able to avoid those up here, but that doesn't generally work for the utility or the end user very well. So when consumption increases, new development, new business, people buy new widgets, we could build more generation, but that's really expensive. The cost of building a new dam well, a new dam not ever going to get built, but building a new plant or a natural gas peaking plant or a wind turbine is pretty spendy. What if we could reduce the aggregate load on this side over here by the same amount? So if someone down here needs a megawatt of power, instead of building a megawatt over here, what if we could reduce everyone's load by a megawatt and everything still stays in balance? So in effect, conservation is, we look at that as a form of generation. You can meet future energy needs through conservation instead of building new. So the current conservation programs that were put together by Bonneville Power Administration were designed to prolong the life of our current generation system and the capacity that we have in place. So instead of trying to save the environment, they were really a financial investment to try to increase the lifespan of our current investment in generation. But it does have some other benefits. We have a certain amount of hydro capacity, and that's pretty well fixed. But if we can reduce the load that we're putting on that capacity, that frees up energy that can be sold and can offset load that would otherwise be met by a carbon emitting source like a natural gas peaking plant or a coal plant in another state. So there are some indirect carbon reduction benefits with conservation. Something that we don't do here yet, it's real common in the Midwest and the South, is a conservation program called demand reduction. We don't do that because there's not a need for it. And we found that people in Coos and Curry County are not real excited with the electric utility being behind the meter, controlling things within their home. They, at this time, prefer the...
Could you define what that is?
Pardon?
Could you define what that...
Behind the meter?
No, the other one. You said
Demand reduction.
Yes, that.
Yes.
Okay.
So, demand reduction is a form of conservation where the utility controls load. So a common form is hot water heater controls. If we're seeing a peak, our utilities asking for a lot of energy, there's an energy shortage in the Pacific Northwest, utilities have ways that they can go in and turn hot water heaters off. The current infrastructure is in place, and we can bring that load down for a period of a couple hours until that kind of crisis peak is over. It's real common with irrigation. Irrigators that are irrigating 1,000 acres of soybean don't care if their pumps get shut off for a couple hours. And it's common in places where generation is, there's less capacity compared to the load, places in the south, because it's the only solution that they have to avoid brownouts. It's something that if growth keeps happening in the Pacific Northwest, we're probably going to have to start looking into eventually. But like I said, the people right now generally, even if it means saving a little money, don't want electric utilities controlling things inside their house. But that type of conservation is something we call dispatchable. Means we can control it. If we need to shed load, you push a button and you shed load. It happens when it's needed, not when it's convenient. So, conservation program goals, as we just talked about, the primary goal was to avoid building new generation, to increase lifespan of what we had. The next goal, next most important goal in my mind anyways, is increasing value. I view conservation programs as a quality of life program for a lot of people. If we can, still living within our budget, how much energy we can afford, if we can keep our house warmer when it's cold, cooler when it's warm, better lit at night, spending the same or less money, to me that's a quality of life enhancement. And see that very often when someone with a forced air furnace that's got leaky ductwork puts in a ductless heat pump. When their power bill goes down 20% and they're comfortable. That's a quality of life improvement, in my opinion. I don't like to think of conservation as deprivation. I know, especially kids, when you tell them you need to conserve energy, they think you're sitting in a dark house with the TV off, with a sweater and blanket on because it's cold, and you're going to suffer. You have to suffer if you want to win conservation. I like to think of conservation as efficient use of energy. You're using as much energy as you need, but you're using it in a way where you're receiving benefit from all of it. You're heating your house, you're not heating the block. You're lighting the room that you need, you're lighting your security lights that you want lit, but you're doing that with 5 or 6 watt LEDs instead of 60 or 70 watt incandescents. It also helps us integrate renewables into the grid. Again, everything has capacity limits, and we often run into limits within the transmission system. Our ability to move energy from one place to another. If we can bring the load down and open up capacity, that allows us to get wind energy from Nebraska into Oregon when we want it. If the pipe's full, they can be generating all kinds of wind energy, and if you can't get it here, you can't use it. And it does reduce the need for carbon-emitting generation. If a common new energy source, they're called peaking plants, they're natural gas turbines that can be brought online very rapidly in response to peaks in demand. And when you burn natural gas, you emit carbon. So we can bring those peaks down to within the capacity levels of the hydro system and the installed wind capacity. Then we don't have to burn natural gas.
Okay. Speaking about filling the pipe, I was told recently by somebody that the losses, load losses from the transmission all the way from the Columbia down to here could be as much as 60%. Is that anywhere near what it is?
I do not believe so. So I couldn't find any specific information on the transmission line that the 230 volt line that comes in and feeds Gold Beach that then Coos Courier brings down to Brookings. But
I didn't mean to jump here.
No, it's a good segue. So because you sent me that email, so I brought this up. This is the bulk transmission grid for WEC, which is the Western Electric Coordinating Council. So the United States is divided up into coordinating councils, and that way if something happens on the East Coast, it can't domino and affect us over here. So believe it or not, you can trace the wire from your house to any house in Los Angeles. There's a connection somewhere. Most of the generation up here on the Columbia, we're right down here. So there's a 500,000 volt line that comes to a big substation here, and then a 230,000 volt line fills off and comes to us. It feels like we're at the end of the world here, and we are at the end of that transmission line, but within the scope of electrical transmission, we're not very far away. It's not too far. There's an express feeder that goes from the Columbia Gorge to Los Angeles that's hundreds and hundreds of miles long. So the general rule of thumb is for the entire transmission grid in the United States, electrical losses are between 4 and 8%. A 500,000 volt line carrying 1 megawatt of energy the rule of thumb is 1% loss per 100 miles.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not sure where that came from, but I could not find any information to support large losses like that. And that would seem like it would make it untenable to operate. Oh, since we were talking about I think I passed it here. Transmission and generation. Weird things happen when there's a lot of need for electricity and not a lot of generation available, capacity available. This was a spreadsheet put together by Idaho Falls Power for their board in early March. There was we had a cold snap. Most of the Pacific Northwest was really cold, and there wasn't a lot of capacity available. So, power from Bonneville Power Administration, $30-something a megawatt. The Lower Snake dams, which there's kind of an ongoing effort to remove, pretty inexpensive power. On the open market, if you were an electric utility that had an energy shortage on March 5th, and you called up a supplier and said, I need a megawatt hour, that would have cost you $1,000 a megawatt hour. So if you had to buy a 20 megawatt load for 7 days under Bonneville contract, it would be $106,000, reasonable. If you were on the spot market trying to purchase it, $3.3 million. You do that for a couple weeks and we would be bankrupt. You couldn't absorb that for very long. So those are the weird things that happen when there's not a lot of electricity available and a lot of people want to use it, which is why conservation is so important. So this is a list of the residential conservation programs that Coos currently offers. You'll notice that most of those tend to be focused on heat or retaining heat. We have heat pump conversion, a heat pump hot water heater, ductless heat pump. Those are all efficient ways to generate heat. And then insulation indoors, those help keep the heat in. The reason that most of the programs are centered around heat and insulation is in a typical home, HVAC accounts for, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, accounts for almost 50% of the energy requirements. Water heating, lighting, refrigeration is about 27%. And then the rest is your TV and all the other things that you have. So we focus our conservation efforts where we can make big headway.
Before you leave those programs, so what do the programs actually do? I mean, we're talking about rebates here, or just information kind of resource?
No, so these are where we contribute money.
That's good.
So we call them incentives because our goal is to incentivize behavior. If someone's furnace needs repaired, we want to offer an economic motivation for them to maybe put in a ductless heat pump instead of repairing the furnace.
Okay, if we're interested in any of these, do we just call you?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, you'll call Sonia. She administers our conservation program. But on our website, we also have kind of some of the details, the specific requirements for each of these. Because we do require a certain performance level for each of these. We want to make sure it's something that's going to actually conserve energy.
What about ductless or ventless dryer?
So those are Energy Star rated, so there is a rebate for Energy Star dryers.
Okay.
It's small. The thing about the heat pump dryers is they're small. Most of those are about 4 cubic feet capacity,
Okay.
which is about 2/3 the size of the typical dryer if you went into Sears and bought a dryer. They use them a lot in Europe,
Okay.
but they use them because there's space constraints. And most of the homes in Europe were built before people had washers and dryers, and so there's some space constraints. Extremely efficient. They're just not popular in the US because they're small. Distributed generation. So we're back to our little model of the electrical grid. Over here we have central station power. Distributed generation is when you put a power plant on your home or business. So most people think of that as solar, but there's a few other options out there. The other one that we see here is we have a couple people with micro hydro. They have a small company on their property. But other places, people put up wind turbines. I've never seen one in real life, but under the umbrella, biomass is considered distributed, an approved form of distributed generation. So if you wanted to burn green waste, it doesn't seem too green to me, but it can. And fuel cells, even though those aren't very common. So wind fuel cells, micro hydro. We have a cap on how big of a power plant will let you put on your house and connect to the grid. And we have that because we have an obligation to keep the grid stable. If we let people get a little carried away and someone started connecting a couple hundred kW of generation, and then they have an equipment failure, and that just trips offline and we don't know about it, having those kind of loads come and go without any control can end up destabilizing the grid, and we end up with outages that affect all their neighbors. Our cap is a little bit larger than most utilities in Oregon. Most utilities cap it at 20 kW. We increased ours. Banded Dunes, the golf course has 30 kW installed. That's what they wanted to put in. We said, yeah, we can work with that. So we increased our cap. We require that the power plant to be located on your premise, so basically behind your meter, because the goal is to primarily offset your consumption. If you want to be a power producer, then there's a whole legal rigmarole that you don't want to go through to deal with that. You get the DEQ involved and all kinds of horrendous paperwork. That's all been eliminated for people that want to put small power plants on their house. But in order to avoid that, we can't have someone in Brookings say, I have 15 acres in the Tokyo Valley, I want to put 30 kW solar up there and then take credit for it down here. And the system's operated in parallel with the distribution system. So when the power plant on your house is generating more than you're using, it gets pushed out onto the grid, and when it's generating less than you're using, you can take energy from the grid to make up that difference. So some of the common questions I hear when people are considering putting a solar panel is the most common one, but some kind of power plant on their house is, first, will it save you money? People are pretty interested in saving on their power bill. And my answer to almost all these questions is, it depends. I'm very unhelpful in that area. Solar pays for itself usually over the long haul, so it's not going to save you a lot of money when you consider the investment in year one. We have a small solar array at our office here in Brookings. That's a 4.4 kilowatt array, and it produces the retail equivalent of $523 worth of electricity a year.
A year?
Yeah. And that's actually right on the money. So it puts out 5,557 kilowatt hours is what it's averaged since it's been in place. The contractor that built it predicted it would put out 5,594. So he was pretty darn close. PV Watts, which is a website that has some of the better solar calculators on it. When I punched in our address and the information about our system, it predicted 5,603 kilowatt hours a year. So that's all pretty good. That tells me that we have a lot of good information about the solar capacity that's reaching the ground in the United States.
What did that cost?
This cost of this is not representative of cost today. I don't remember the dollars, but this thing will never pay for itself.
What about cost today for something similar?
So today, the kind of back of the napkin estimates on having solar installed, if it's on your roof, this is on a freestanding structure, which had to be built to the wind here, which contributed to a large proportion of the costs, are between $2 and $3 a watt. So this is 4,400 watts, so whatever 280 times 4,400 if I'm not getting math on the fly. But that's kind of generally what solar is going for now. The cost of panels are probably 20% of what they were when we bought this system. The price of panels have just plummeted recently. And again, we built this on a really heavy-duty freestanding structure that was pretty expensive. So our costs are not representative of what someone's putting it on their roof today. It's much, much cheaper.
Can I say something to that? Yeah, I just recently left Colorado selling solar. I was a sales manager there, and that's a pretty small system for a business. It's like a medium-sized home, and that was running about $20,000 for that setup, but that was with SunPower, which is the most efficient and therefore the most expensive on the market too. Yeah, for example, those 185 watt panels, they're using 360 watt panels per residence.
And these are
So less panels, less cost.
newer systems. You can get the same capacity with fewer panels, so it takes up less roof. So the efficiency is definitely increased.
Less equipment overall then too. You don't need as many racking systems or tracking and all that.
The one have microinverters on each panel that are more efficient than the single inverter. And the prices keep coming down.
So are there rebates and ways to get a little money back out of doing something like that?
So there's a federal tax credit still, and Oregon just passed legislation that's going to go into effect in January 2020, offering a state rebate.
Got any idea how much that amounts to?
Yeah, that's right.
I read it quickly. It sounds like for most people it's going to be about $5,000.
Nice.
Low-income households, it indicates that it would be double. I'm not 100% sure where they're setting the threshold for low income. It seemed to indicate that it's the same threshold to receive energy assistance, so low income heating and energy.
And that's in
assistance.
addition to the federal tax credit.
Yes.
You can take both.
Pardon?
You can take both.
You can take both, yes.
And is that statewide or per county that they have?
It's statewide.
Statewide, right?
It seemed to indicate that there was going to be an annual cap on it. That
Oh.
They were setting aside so much money for the program each year.
So get it while you can.
More about it as we kind of get closer to it going into effect in January.
On that 30% tax credit, that's this year. It has to be installed by the end of this year. Next year it goes to 26%, then 22%, unless something changes, it's going away. That's again federal. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, will it save you money? It'll save money on your power bill. If you spend $15,000 after, or $14,000 after tax credits, or $10,000 after the Oregon tax credit goes into effect, it's $500 a month can save you money. That's a personal value decision, but it's not a get-rich Ponzi scheme. Good for the environment.
If you were, can I just ask, if you were about to buy a heat pump, which many people around here do, you have to spend $10,000 on a heat pump that's going to last for 10 years. You could scrap the heat pump and just go to this, and then you drive your heaters from the solar panel. So most people have a heat pump for heat. So if you're going to spend $10,000 on a heat pump, think about this instead. Forget the heat pump. That's my thought.
So, is distributed generation or conservation most cost effective? It's pretty easy to do the math in all the different scenarios. Look at what a ductless heat pump or a heat pump I could save versus the cost. What's this solar system going to produce? But in almost, I'm sure there's exceptions out there, but in just about every case, conservation is more cost effective. You're going to get more savings for your money invested. Most entities that promote solar are going to tell you do that after you've done everything else. Your light bulbs change. Do you have a efficient form of heat? Do you have good windows? Do you have adequate insulation? All those other things first. Then you're going to get, generally you're going to get more bang for your buck with conservation. There might be some situations where that's not the case, but in our experience, if you have $10,000 to spend and you're in an older house, your money's going to go further with insulation, windows, ductless heat pumps, those kind of efforts than solar. So is it good for the environment? It could be. I think we talked about it with just like conservation efforts. If you free up capacity and allow a lot of the carbon-free generation that we enjoy in the Pacific Northwest to be used to offset carbon generation elsewhere, then absolutely. Can I power my home during an outage? Maybe. Another one of those maybes. With most systems, the answer is no. When the inverter senses a loss of power from the grid, they're designed to trip your solar system offline. And they do that to protect people working on the lines. If you are backfeeding electricity onto the power lines, you have linemen working on them, and it's not well grounded, then you could hurt somebody. So we try to avoid that situation. There are systems that can supply power during outages. They require a separate isolation switch to make sure you're isolated from the grid, and they generally require some kind of battery system to keep your power supply stable, so that the costs go up pretty significantly. And there's people in the room have explored that option, and can probably talk in a little more detail than I can in a little bit. But the other thing to consider is, unless you have a large battery system, we generally don't have power outages between noon and 3 in the afternoon when the sun's shining. It happens sometimes, but it seems to be in the middle of the night when it's raining hard. At least that's when I get the phone calls. My wife's got really good at sleeping through them. And why can't my electric bill be zero? I needed 300 kilowatt hours from you guys. I gave you 300 kilowatt hours back. Why do I have to pay that pesky basic charge? That irritates me. So the reason for that is this big blue wedge here. That's our purchase power cost. So if we're saving on buying power from Bonneville because we bought it from you instead, we can save right here. All these other wedges are the cost that we have, whether you buy any power from us or not. I think it's 38% is purchase power. The rest of it is we have trucks. They keep paying me for some reason. We have offices, and all that. Those charges remain fixed no matter how much power you purchase. If we had a rate structure that really recouped all of our fixed charges from a fixed charge on the bill, then that basic charge for a residential home would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60. So we kind of split it and recoup some of those charges through energy sales and some through the basic charge. But that's why we always have that fee on the bill.
How much is your connection fee per month?
For residential, $26.94.
Yes.
Okay. So another way to look at it, if you were looking at a $20,000 system, if you had to back it up with batteries, even in today's lower prices, it's about half that cost. It's about $10,000 out of pocket to have a full battery backup system. So $30 a month, roughly $360 a year. It'd take you a lot of years before you'd have to pay $10,000 because they are the battery. You're the battery for the home.
You're using the grid as a battery, essentially.
So it's worthwhile then.
And then Lee wanted to hold off the questions till we get to the end. So I just had a couple other kind of fun facts here based on some of the emails that I received in preparation for this. So people always ask, why don't we build more wind and solar? And the proponents of taking out the lower Snake River dams say that we can offset that with wind and solar. Those conversations made me really nervous for this reason right here. This is from Idaho Falls again, that same time, beginning of March. We have hydro generation here, which is it's good because it's reliable. We know it's going to be there. During that cold snap, generally it gets really still when it's really cold. So there was 2,648 megawatts of wind capacity built out there. It was generating between 1 and 5 megawatts of power. So that means 2,643 megawatts was sitting idle because there's no wind blowing when we really, really needed it. Starting in the morning, there's over 11,000 megawatts of solar capacity in California, and they can ship that up here when needed. But 6 o'clock in the morning, they were generating 0. Throughout the day, by 10 o'clock, they were producing some power, and that was helpful. But by 7 o'clock at night, no more power. And so when we talk about removing dispatchable generation, like hydro, which we call it dispatchable because we can turn on the switch and get it whenever we need it, when people say we can replace that with wind and solar, well, we can on some days, but during the coldest week of the year, it would be a shame to turn off everyone's lights at 7 o'clock at night because the sun's not shining anymore. So that's just something I'd like to talk about, because there's an ongoing discussion about removing the dams, and I think they are an absolutely wonderful resource that we should protect. And then this is something that just fascinates me. They call it the duck curve. And that's the California load profile. So in 2012, this is the megawatts. This is time of day. So in the morning, the load was 21 megawatts. And people get up and start eating power, so it jumped up to 22 megawatts. And then dropped back down, and then people go home in the evening, and then it jumped up to 24 megawatts. And then we started building a whole lot of solar in California. So now, people are still using power in the morning, and then about 9 o'clock, when the sun comes up, it drops down to here. And then at 7 o'clock at night, when everyone gets home, the sun goes down, well, it ramps up really steeply like that. So they have to have generation sitting there, not producing power all day long, so it's not paying for itself, that can ramp up that steeply, and that's a challenging feat. And if it keeps going, they're predicting that this could get negative, where there's more solar generation during certain times of the day, during certain days of the year, than there is load. And they don't know how to deal with that yet. But it's not the solar's bad, it creates unique challenges for utilities to work around in order to accommodate it. And if you have a glut of it in one place and we don't have transmission capacity to get it somewhere else where it's needed, what do you do with it? So that's kind of my comments for the evening. Questions now, or
So we're going to move into a kind of a group discussion setting here where we can get all our questions answered with Jacob here. If you want to come up the chair and sit with us, I'm sure you got lots from a lot of provocative things in what you said. It was really interesting. Anybody?
I'd like you to explain the duck curve, because that's something that I wasn't quite understanding last time I heard it.
that looks like a duck, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. To me, I guess I had no idea that the power is just a complete balance. Like if it's not being used, it's being wasted. Or if there's nothing, there's always has to be just balance between the grid and what we're using. And it just seems odd to me. I guess you can't, I always thought that I guess they transmitted other parts of the country if we have more here than we need. But, I mean, is it not feasible to store the power? I guess that's what a battery is, that you can't build something that would, you have like that solar in California where they're producing all kinds of, you can't store that?
So grid level storage is currently outrageously expensive. It's possible. But when you're talking about batteries that can store megawatts of energy,
Sure.
that's a lot of power, and so it's generally not feasible. There are utilities that are using it. Hawaii has deployed some grid level storage, and it makes sense there. They have a lot of solar. They have a lot of solar because their other power source is diesel generators, and electricity there is very expensive, like 45 cents a kilowatt hour expensive. So when you're trying to not burn diesel, and you have lot of solar installed, and your small utility, these islands aren't big, it pencils out for grid level storage there. For on a larger scale, it doesn't pencil out yet. They're working on it. There's some brilliant people working on the problem. Someone's going to crack it, and that'll radically change the conversation about things like the duck curve. If you can grab that energy during the day and use it at night when you need it, that's a whole game changer. It just doesn't exist. I did see, I went to an excellent presentation by a brilliant individual whose name I can't recall now. He's a teacher at MIT, and he and some of his students are working on battery technology that is, if it works, is going to be inexpensive. There's no rare earth metals in it, so there's no cobalt, there's no lithium, and it would be great for grid level storage applications. It won't work for electric vehicles. It's too bulky, it's too heavy, and it needs to be cycled every day because it retains heat in the batteries, so you can't put energy in it and ask for it a week later. But for something like the duck curve, where you're going to charge it every day between noon and 3 and use it every night at 9 o'clock, it could be a brilliant solution. It's just not to market yet.
I put in a system, this is my third full year, it's 20 panels on a garage building that services a cottage that one person lives in now. It's 2 bedrooms and a kitchen shed. We've some cold storage in the garage. I get full credit, end of the year, it carries into the next, so sometime in May, I stop paying for electricity, May or June, and cold weather comes and I don't have any conservatory equipment in either of those buildings. I start paying again, but I even out, say in either December or January, I see I have a credit that carries forward and I don't pay until again, maybe February, March. I get not 100% of what is used in that building. When I put it in, Tesla's Powerball battery was on everybody's website. But if you called Tesla, it wasn't available or usable. If you called the solar company, they showed it on their website, it wasn't there. I don't think it's there today. No. Shannon gave me a proposal to add 5 panels so I could get some credits, put in storage, an LG battery, and I have to change inverters. It was going to cost me more to do that than I paid 3 years ago for the system. It's worth doing. It's interesting to do. I think conservation probably does you better. And the problem you have is what's going on in Washington. There's a huge solar farm that may get local approvals off in New England, but the federal government is making noises to kill it to keep markets for coal. There's a Native American tribe that's being denied certification as a tribe, the Wampanoags, who welcome the Pilgrims, because their casino will compete with one of people who support Trump. So you just don't like to put politics into this, but if you plan ahead, don't think that next year or the year after, hopefully in 2021, better federal benefits will be there, but you can't count on it. But it's, storage is very difficult. And it's, it would cost me more to add that storage, and I'd generate $150 worth of electricity a year and pay $17,000 after all the credits. That's a hard one to justify, even if you're green. So.
I've got a question about where does our power come from? Is it all hydro, or do we have other types of power generation?
It is, look at the spreadsheet in the back of my head. It's about 84% hydro, about 9% from a nuke plant that BPA owns. And then the rest is, they call it unallocated market purchases, where they call it and say, we need power, but it's just from the grid. But a lot of that is from natural gas peaking plants. So they say 2 to 4% of our power mix is from a carbon emitting source.
Where's the new plant?
Could have told you if you didn't ask me.
If you remember.
I can look it up really easy when we
Ask the questions over there.
Do you think you could offer an incentive for getting an electric car that's hooked up to the grid? In other words, it'd be nice to say that Tesla, that our utility wants us to have this capability, even though I know it's very preliminary yet, but they're not offering it. And it's something that would be helpful over time to the utility, I think, for everybody's battery to be hooked up to the grid. I know there's a lot of complexities there, but I think the biggest one is just getting Tesla to let us hook up to the battery.
So I'm kind of getting hard of hearing, but so you were asking, have we considered offering incentives for EVs or EV charging?
Yeah, if you could offer an incentive, then we could go to Tesla and say, look, our utility wants us to have this capability, please put it in.
An incentive to get Tesla to come here.
Exactly.
Tesla is difficult to work with.
Sure, of course, and they're quite busy. So.
I've emailed Tesla numerous times and I've never heard from them.
Wow.
It's a black hole with them, and I get they're working at capacity and they've got a lot of irons in the fire. However, just electric vehicles in general, not specific to Tesla, are on our radar. I think they're a great opportunity. In the industry, we look for something called beneficial electrification, and those are opportunities that are kind of a win-win. Something good for the environment is good for our costs, helps keep our costs our members down, convenient for our members, that's beneficial. If it's good for the environment, it's going to raise costs, then you start having to make value decisions, or if it's not good for the environment, but it's going to lower costs, you start making value decisions. But when something is kind of a win across the board, it makes it a no-brainer. And I think if done correctly, vehicle electrification is one of those wins for everybody. I've been waving the flag. I'm working with our board through our strategic planning process, where they set goals for us on which direction we need to take the Coos Electric. And I'm pushing for electric vehicle projects. I don't know how that's going to take shape, if anything, yet, but some of the ideas that I'm promoting are either incentives for battery electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid purchases, home charging infrastructure, and I would like to see us put in some public charging infrastructure. So we'll see how we get there. But if done correctly, there's times during the day, specifically at night, when we are not using the generation capacity we have available to us as we could be. And if we can take load that's easy to manipulate and move it to nighttime, that's good for us. We sell kilowatt hours when they're inexpensive for us. Members save on transportation costs. That's kind of what I call a win-win. And home vehicle charging is pretty easy to manipulate. You tell your car when to start charging, and it does it. It doesn't require a lot of conscious effort on behalf of the consumer. I mean, there's some potential issues too. I kind of ponder a future where there's 10,000 electric vehicles in Curry County, and suddenly 10,000 vehicle chargers come on at 9 o'clock. So we need to figure out how to manage that, but I think it's all manageable.
Bring it down to a personal level. There's a lot of seniors in this town, okay? I have a 4-room apartment, and right now all my thermostats are off. At the source, I have cut it off and everything, and my last bill was over $24. Explain that. I've already gone down the checklist. Double pane windows, no drafts, cut off one bedroom, all the things I can do. I just don't understand.
Well, that's a tricky thing to troubleshoot from the armchair here.
Does she get an energy audit?
We don't do in-home energy audits.
Oh, you don't?
We don't.
Well, is there any kind of incentive for people on Social Security? I mean, I don't want to cry I'm poor, but I mean, it's a decent living right now on Social Security. God only knows what will happen, but, and you pay high rents, and then you pay high electric, and then you pay high this and high that. Pretty soon your Social Security's gone.
Well, it's this kind of equity issues are kind of tricky minefields to walk through. As you mentioned, we do kind of a retirement community, so we have a lot of seniors in our members, and when we're not for profit, we charge what it costs to do business, plus the margins that the banks require us to collect in order to loan to us, and then we give those margins back as capital credits eventually. So we don't have a shareholder dividend or some nest egg that we can take money out of. So when we start manipulating rates, it kind of gets dangerous. Okay, we're going to give a 10% discount to senior citizens. Well, that's 40% of the people in our service territory. You end up having to raise rates by 10% to the other group of people. So it's tricky. What I would like to see more of is, instead of programs that give double incentive for solar on the houses of low-income people, because most low-income individuals don't own their roofs. They're renting, and not so much in Curry County, but if you look broader, a lot of them people live in multifamily dwellings where they really don't own their roof. If you want to make an impact on those people's lives, instead of saying we can help you put solar on your roof that you can't do anyways, I'd rather see that money go to programs where we replace forced air furnaces with ductless heat pumps and do things like that have meaningful, immediate impact on people that are struggling to pay their power bill. But ductless heat pumps aren't sexy like solar is, so it just doesn't get the attention of the legislature.
Jacob, along those lines, you did have somebody who did energy audits and came out to people's homes. Did you at one point?
We did quite some time ago before I was with Coos Curry Electric.
How can we get that back? Because that would certainly be helpful for everybody.
We lost that. I don't know if everyone remembers when Enron was in the news, and the wholesale power market markets kind of went from being extremely stable to extremely volatile. A lot of small utilities like Coos Electric had trouble managing those events, and as a result, Coos was operating in the red for a number of years. It was dangerous enough that the banks were considering issuing fiduciary to take over because we weren't going to meet our bank covenants. So we worked with our ECA, which is a national group, and got our rates straightened out so that we were covering our costs. We weren't in the red. And again, I wasn't here, so I'm just kind of reiterating what I've been told. And we did a really poor job, I think, at telling our members what we were doing and why. And as a result, we had a large rate increase, didn't explain it very well, and a group of citizens got our board flipped. They got some people that they wanted on the board and some incumbents on our board removed, and they went through kind of took the hatchet to the organization, and that group was dissolved.
So their priority was to save money rather than to have this extra.
To keep us in business.
Yeah.
Well, I called this week of the year, my bill went up to $185. And I still live in the same 4 rooms, you know. I get the feeling that you all look out the window and say, "Ooh, it's cold today, let's jack it up." You know, I don't understand, because I'm very conservative with my energy, because I've seen those bills.
So
So what do we do in the winter when it's cold?
I'll give you my business card. I have some with me, and please reach out to me, and we can sit down. We can look at your account and your usage, and kind of see if we can figure out what's
There's something wrong. There's something wrong with that.
Kind of money, yeah.
There's something wrong with that.
It's something.
But I'll do my best to help. To see if we can help. I mean, again, it's hard. It's really hard to troubleshoot.
I understand, I don't understand.
Jacob, I have a quick question. Is the cost to the customer per kilowatt hour, is that fixed, or does it change depending on the time of day, depending on the season, depending on...
It's fixed. So
Oh, it is fixed?
Yes.
same price, 24 hours a day, every day of the year.
And how much is it? Is it 9 cents?
I'm sorry,
Is it the 9 cents that you had on the...
9.41 cents
Okay.
for residential.
You have a typical, 1,000 square feet, single family that costs. Do you have sort of a median?
So a couple years ago, I took just all of our meters that were on the residential rate, how much energy they use, divided by the number of meters, and can you remember what that number was, Shelley? I want to say it was 1,250 kilowatt hours a month. And that's an average of the year, so half the year would be less, half the year would be more.
I want to go home and look at my bill and see, I want to compare myself with someone else and see if I'm using more or less.
I rent, so I don't see my electric bill, but don't they tell you like I've seen it when I did, is that what you used last month, last year, don't they give you some feedback and some...
So we have a 13-month graph on it.
Yes.
I think that's a good way to, get some feedback as to what you're doing and if you're conserving it.
And we do have on our website, on the homepage, there's a big button that says My Account. You click that, and you have to go through a registration process. You need your account number and some other things. But in there, we So we have an automated metering system, and we try to get reads from all the meters at midnight each night, so we have these nice 24-hour intervals. It's not the greatest metering system in the world, so we don't have a 100% success rate, but for most of our meters, you can go in there and you can see each day what you've used. In 24-hour blocks, and we also have some overlays you can put on that graph that shows the average daily temperature, and it's pretty interesting to look at a month, and I look at mine, and the temperature goes down, my usage goes up, and the temperature goes up, my usage goes down. You can just watch it. It's pretty informative.
Well, we could freeze, I mean, it doesn't matter.
So, like I said, if you come to the office, we can bring all that up, and we'll.
I've been there, done that.
Sometimes we can learn a lot by looking at that. And,
Okay.
we also have a gentleman named Steve who can sometimes get communication is just tough, but either get a little bit more granular information. So we can go back and look at a month and say, oh, you know, something's happening at 6 o'clock every morning. This big load comes on, and it looks like it stays on for 3 hours. What is that? And we can work with you to try to identify what those things are.
Tesla.
Is there a trend to solar? Are we seeing increased solar usage in Coos Curry?
We are. Let's see. In 2011, when I got here, I think we had 12 net metering accounts. Most of those were solar, a couple micro hydros. And that went up to 14, and it stayed at 14 for a long time. In the last couple of years, I think we've had 10 more come online. That's it, just in the last couple of years.
Can you put it into a percentage? I think the other sources, you said hydro and...
Less than 1%.
Oh, less than...
I would think it'd be less than 1%.
I'm sorry.
Wouldn't it be less than 1% if it was 24 people or 24 households?
Oh, what percentage of
the users?
Oh, it's a fraction. In
Yes,
fact, we
100 to 1%.
we have a cap that the most solar that we can have connected to our grid is 1/2 of 1% of our historic peak, which for us is about 84 megawatts, I believe.
How close are we?
We're not
So,
we're not running out of capacity.
the capacity is what we can only have that much generated by households. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't get that at first, thank you.
And again, that's all for grid stability. If every house had a solar panel on it, and it went from bright to the marine layer rolls in, all of a sudden you just end up with grid instability and some problems.
I have a question, first a statement. We came from California and I had solar there, and I was serviced by PG&E. Now PG&E has a rate structure that's tiered. Depending on when you use the power and how much you use, you pay a lot more for it. Up to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. Compare that to your 9.4. Now, the way PG&E handled the net metering, that is what they gave me for the power I generated, they paid me exactly the same as they charged me. So if I was in a 20 cent per kilowatt hour tier, they paid me 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So technically, I could have gone to zero and in fact started making money. The problem with the making money was that if you started supplying more than you used, you got 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So it wasn't worth it. I sized my solar system so that it would never reach that point, and it worked out well for us that way. But 9.4 cents a kilowatt hour, it's pretty hard to offset that with anything, with solar or anything.
I talk to a lot of people that are passionate about solar. They feel like it's the right thing to do, and they get a little offended when they see the numbers, that it kind of doesn't pencil out, and we're really fortunate that we have this carbon-free generation source that we have in the Pacific Northwest. We're extremely fortunate to have it, and it gives us access to very inexpensive power. So when people get a little frustrated that they can't do a lot with solar, I equate that to you bought a Prius Prime to get 65 miles to the gallon, and you go to the Chevy dealership and complain to them that they can't beat it. Well, you got the best thing on the market. We have a great asset here, and it's something I'm pretty proud of.
But now my question. The main sources of power that I think of are wave generation, of course hydro, solar power, and wind generation. Are any of those happening in your district? Are there any plans to build any of those power sources in the Coos area?
No. Wave energy is a tricky thing. We contributed, I think, about $35,000 over a couple of years to a wave energy project that was going to go in by Reedsport as a kind of a demo project to see that it's feasible. That entity spent millions of dollars over about 10 years and built nothing. Wave energy is tricky. There's a lot of energy harnessed in the ocean. It's definitely there. It's a pretty hostile environment. It's a tough place to have equipment and have it last. And people are sensitive to the ocean. Fishermen are sensitive to their fisheries. What happens when you put these generators in the ocean? You start creating magnetic fields. Does it attract predator fish? Does it repel predator fish? A lot of people don't really know, or no one really knows yet. They are making headway in Iceland on some wave energy projects. I don't know a lot about them, but they're actually getting some equipment and some buoys in the water. So we'll see where that goes. Regarding solar and wind comes up a lot because, man, the wind sure blows, doesn't it? Unfortunately, it's a poor wind for generating electricity. It's fast and it's gusty, and they want they call it smooth laminar airflow, but 15, 20 mile an hour winds that are just real smooth are what works best. You put these big wind turbines where they just get hit with gusts of 30, 40 mile an hour winds, and they don't function.
Interesting.
That's why the Great Plains and the Columbia River Gorge, those you see a lot of wind there. They have the correct kind of wind.
How secure is our system when the earthquake hits, which will happen? What kind of backup generation do you have?
None.
None.
That's my question too.
I assume we were talking about the Cascade event. When that happens, we're not going to have power, and that's just kind of
For a long time?
Potentially. Nobody really knows what will happen in this area with an earthquake of that magnitude. They have all kinds of models that predict what the damage is going to look like going inland, but they're all models. So we don't know how extensive the transmission system is going to be damaged. They're not going to hustle to get power to Brookings. They're going to get the metro areas. When you look at kind of disaster response, where can we do the greatest good for the most people the fastest? And Curry County does not fit that model. I mean, just to be frank, it's hard to get here, and there's not a lot of people here when we get here. And backup generation is not real effective in a situation like that. There was some high-level discussions years ago about putting a 10 megawatt biofuel generator South Coast. And the reality of something like that is, 10 megawatts, we could run Fred Meyer, we could run the hospital, we could run some essential services. We're going to be out of diesel in a couple days to get material out of the wood to burn. If there's no supplies coming in. And a 10 megawatt generator is going to burn a stack of wood chips the size of this room in 8 or 9 hours. So I mean, if you want to run one of those for 2 months, I mean, you need a mountain of fuel, and we're not going to have the diesel here to go get it out of the woods if we wanted to after a couple of days. It's not the fuel supply here. So things like that are interesting conceptually, but the reality of it is when the Cascade event happens, there's not going to be power here for a while, unfortunately.
We're getting close to the end of our time, so I want to catch some last questions, but I did want to ask you too, Sonia, you do the conservation programs, did I hear that right?
Yes.
And these are online on your website?
Yes.
If somebody wants to look up ways to save electricity, and also about those rebate programs you were talking about, those are also online, is that right? You can read more about them?
All of this.
Yeah, there's hard copies in our office if you're not an online person.
Okay, great. Anything else you really want us to know as far as resources you can provide for us? That cover it pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I would just like to add that we have our member appreciation days coming up, and there is going to be an opportunity to test drive our electric vehicle, and that is in Brookings on August 20th, from 11:30 to 1:30.
Teslas?
We have a Chevy.
It's a Volt?
Chevy Bolt.
Cool.
And
I will tell you this, the Tesla, proud owner, it, before I bought it, I looked at the energy, and it's actually pretty negligible. And in fact, I was all set to have my rent raised, and my landlord hasn't raised my rent. You get the advice from Tesla, so I am using your energy at nighttime, but it doesn't, in my opinion, and from guys who do meter, it's pretty negligible for what they have, so. And I was going to ask you, if this is your business, will this be like how we get our energy and how we look? Will it be, number one, if you could completely start over, what would you do as being an expert? And number two, will they look back 100 years from now at how we do all this and just think we were completely idiots? It just seems everything is so embedded, like coal and the infrastructure, and I get it, it costs millions and millions of dollars to build a power plant, and that's why we're all just stuck doing everything the same way. I just wonder, in the future, if they'll look back and go, my God, what were they thinking?
What were you thinking?
Human progress is a wonderful thing, and you look back and horse and buggy, and they go, what were they thinking? Put your piano in a wagon and try to get across the United States, and kind of crazy, right?
Cascadia vocals, we'll get to rebuild everything there.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, there you go.
Well, that's how we know.
30%.
Yeah, those are the survive.
So I wanted to thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Jacob, for being here. It's Jacob Knudsen from Coos Curry Electric, and brought some staff. This is wonderful. Thanks so much. just want you to be sure and, look for those emails about the next upcoming lecture. We're going to have, well, Bill Bradbury. Get that name down. Anyway, next month, talking about the political situation around some of the bills we were trying to get through Congress at this point. And that'll be the fourth Wednesday, just like today, of next month at 5:30. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.